Warning, this podcast has stories of real-life events and true crime that happens every day. These stories may contain adult language and graphic or disturbing details not suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised. In our society, most people are content to go through their daily lives safely and peacefully. But our society is not always safe or peaceful. For that reason, some men and women answer a higher calling to defend and protect their fellow man. You probably know someone who is one of these people, or maybe you are one of these people. The ones who see and do the things most people would never want to. These things are sometimes heroic and beautiful, but often they are horrific and terrifying. It's these things they don't share about with other people. It's these things they carry with them, so you don't have to. But when they get together, they talk to each other about them. And they call these stories war stories. Welcome to another episode of War Stories. I'm Tom, and there is no John. He would have spoken right there, but he's not here because with all the craziness going on in the world, if you're listening to this later, this is being recorded during the nationwide riots over the death of George Floyd and some of the deaths of some of these other people like Freddie Gray and stuff that have kind of led up to this moment. But I am joined by the host of the Roll Call Room podcast, Nick. What's going on?
Hey, what's up, buddy? How are you? How's everything going?
Oh, I'm going crazy like everybody else. 10 weeks of quarantine and lockdown, and now all these looting and riots, which I think the quarantine lockdown, the 10 weeks is kind of building the tension that's making this so bad right now. It's just people are ready to explode, and it's culminating in what we're seeing go on nationwide. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I mean, the one thing about the riots is it's definitely a social experiment that maybe COVID has kind of passed us. We can come out of quarantine now, maybe. It's okay to go out in public, I guess, now, but not in the fashion that some folks are doing it.
I see posts, people saying, it's okay to set cars on fire and not go to the beach? I said, well, the people setting cars on fire are, 6 feet apart and wearing masks. It's fine.
Yeah. I do have to give the rioters that. I mean, a good portion of them are still wearing masks. Yeah. I would like to think to protect themselves from COVID and not from being identified. Right. But the cop in me is thinking the latter. Mm-hmm. I'm just being pessimistic, I guess,
I think realistic, not pessimistic.
Yeah. It's a tragedy all around. I mean, the whole thing, no one hates bad cops worse than good cops. Right. That's the thing, and I think that's what the nation needs to understand. I think that's what some of the protesters need to understand, is that when instances like this happen, or we see stuff that happened with George Floyd, my skin curled. I cringed when I couldn't even watch the whole entire video, the one angle of the video. I still cannot watch the whole entire thing because it goes against the grain of everything that you and I and every other law enforcement officer has been trained, which is defensive tactics are defensive tactics. Right. You're not defending anything by using a specific tactic or a maneuver that's not needed.
Right.
And I think that's the big problem with us good cops that are out there that have our opinion about this thing. But to lump them all in with, Freddie Gray and,
hell, Rodney King, if you want to go back that far.
Rodney King was clear cut. I mean, that was one of the first times that a recorded law enforcement abuse was filmed. Disastrous, results at the end. But there are, I think, in some cases, I think we need to allow investigations to play out. There's reasons why there are autopsy reports. There are reasons why there are federal investigations. And I'm not saying that this George Floyd one, that's going to exonerate anyone. I mean, I think we can all agree that a knee hold of that magnitude for that long is probably unnecessary.
Yeah. Well, we're going to get into that because I used to teach arrest and control, and specifically, I wrote policy on neck restraints. So that should be I don't want to say a fun conversation, but definitely an interesting one. Tell our audience a little bit about your background in your podcast.
So I started my law enforcement career in New York City when I was 16 years old. I was a volunteer for the New York City Police Department, which was the most insane thing that I've ever done in my life.
I was imagine that.
Yeah, I was an auxiliary at 16 with NYPD uniform on with no gun. It was really, really stupid. So I started my career when I was 16. Then I moved down to Virginia. I joined an agency in the Northern Virginia area. I was a officer. Then I was a sergeant. Then I left the agency because of some poor leadership. Decided to come back because I missed the people. I was bumped down to an officer. During that time of being bumped down, struggled very, very heavily with mental health issues. A lot of PTSD from some tough stuff that, we all get to see on the scene. I think a little blow to my ego going from sergeant to officer, just culmination of a lot of things.
Right.
I'm actually, I'm a suicide survivor, so I'm not afraid to admit that. And dealing with that made me realize that there's not enough people speaking out against the fact that law enforcement suicides are skyrocketing. Last year, 228 of them, way more than line of duty deaths.
Oh, yeah.
It really frustrated me. It frustrated me because the more research I did, the more I realized that it wasn't being spoken about, and it wasn't being spoken about officers that tried to do it and then didn't do it or whatever the results were. So in October 27th, was when I started, the Roll Call Room podcast. I started it initially with the thought that, it was just going to affect my agency. I just wanted some people that I knew in my agency that were struggling with mental health to listen to it. And it got completely out of control, out of control pretty quickly. Just like you post an episode, you're looking at numbers, and the numbers would just keep going up. Yep. And, my co-host at the time and I always thought that the department was going to shut us down after about 3 or 4 episodes, maybe 5 episodes we would get out. And it didn't happen. And then we were walking on glass, like on eggshells. We were like, when is the foot going to drop?
Yeah, you're on borrowed time at that point.
Yeah. And then we hit 25,000 listeners. And then I got called in. And I got called in separately from my co-host, and it was we know about this podcast. We're not happy about you talking about command staff, and and then from there it just went on to, we continued to grow because we didn't listen to the advice of our chief.
Advice in air quotes.
Yeah, advice in air quotes.
Although I cannot order you to, I strongly suggest.
Yeah, he kept on saying, I know your First Amendment rights. And when somebody says that they know what your rights are, it's just like out on the street. You need to be careful because they're setting you up.
Yep.
So the podcast got sent to our city attorney's office. The city attorney was like, we can't tell these guys to shut it down. It's their First Amendment right. And ultimately, the department figured out other ways to I was on probation because I remember I left and I came back and I had a year of probation. And ultimately, they gave me they trumped up some stuff and forced me out. And it was basically all about the podcast. So that was the hill that I decided to die on, which was mental health for law enforcement versus my law enforcement career, which I'm not unhappy with the decision that I made. I think it's a very hot topic right now. And I think tying into us talking about the riots and everything, we were doing so well this year. We were seeing a 30% reduction in law enforcement suicides. Now my fear is that we are going to see higher. Yeah, we're going to see higher. We're going to see higher than 228 from last year. I can tell you. We lost a NYPD officer last night to suicide. It needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about, and just the stigma needs to stop. So that's my spiel, man.
Yeah, it sounds like we have very similar stories. I retired and I missed the environment, and I said, we need a forum where veterans and because when I would hang out with all my veteran buddies, we'd all swap stories, and even if their story was from Iraq or my story was from dealing with a crazy suspect or whatever, there are all these same themes of dealing with human misery and dealing with the worst of the worst and having to keep calm under pressure. And I realized I could better serve the community by bringing those stories to the public and saying, hey, this is what these people are dealing with. And nobody wants to ask about suicide attempts. Nobody wants to ask about the worst day of your life. Nobody wants to ask about all the awful stuff that you've seen, even though they actually want to ask. They, deep down they want to. They just don't know how. And then, as I always say, once they do ask, if they're ballsy enough to ask and you're willing to answer, getting those stories and getting those answers face to face is often so uncomfortable that, very quickly into that conversation, all they're thinking of is, oh God, how do I back out of this? I don't want to hear anymore. I didn't expect this.
What's funny is that you say that is what when I tell people, when I tell my story and I tell them that I'm a law enforcement suicide survivor, the look that I get from other cops is like exactly that.
Yep.
They're like, we need to change this subject because there's two schools of thought, which is he probably wasn't meant for this job in 2 weeks, or two, I have thought about it before and I don't want to
face that. Yeah.
I don't hear about it. And honestly, the majority of them are their second one.
Yeah.
Because if you allow yourself to sit down and really think about your mental health as a law enforcement, in the law enforcement profession, you are struggling. You just don't know it. Yeah. And it's even worse when you leave it. Like,
oh God, yeah.
It's even worse. Like you and I that are now, I've been gone now for a month and a half from the profession. For the last 2 weeks, I have nonstop woken up from nightmares.
Right.
And it's from decompressing all of the dead bodies, the violence that I've seen, the suicides, all that stuff that you just you categorize it, you put it in the back of your brain. You don't have it on a daily basis anymore. Now you got to deal with it.
Yeah, we had a listener contact us because they got to an episode where one of our veteran friends was talking about reaching out for help and going to the VA and just talking about the awful nightmare that was going to the VA and how awful that process was and how terribly he was treated. And, the culmination of that conversation obviously was a very serious one. But what ended up happening is this listener contacts us and he says, man, I've been retired for many years, and listening to that episode, by the time I was done, I was in tears. Yeah. And I just needed to reach out to you because I thought I was done with this stuff, and I'm retired. I thought it was behind me, but it's not. And I thought maybe coming and talking to you guys on your show would help me, but also help others that think they've put it behind them or think they're done with it or think there's no issue. And it really, all that stuff has to go somewhere. And for us, when we have to keep it cool under pressure, when we're out dealing with someone's worst day, on a daily basis, we always say, it may be their worst day, but for you, it's Thursday.
Yes.
And that has to go somewhere.
Yeah. And I will tell you, bluehelp.org does a phenomenal job with cataloging all of the law enforcement suicides. And a lot of the data that they receive is self-reported stuff from family members and so on. The stuff that we don't have an accurate record on is our retirees, because our lifespan after retirement is so short.
Yeah. Well, they say average is 5 years?
5 years. 5 years. And you get 5 years to enjoy your pension. But a majority of them either die of heart disease, high blood pressure, some sort of result of stress, or they take their own lives.
Yeah.
And, my show, at first when I started the Roll Call Room podcast, I thought about the line officers. And then the more and more I started to peel back the layers, the more and more I wanted to appeal to the 24-year veteran that's just about to retire, or the 19-year veteran. Because if all you've done your entire career is have cop friends, cop buddies,
when you retire, it's gone.
That's over.
Yep.
Yeah. Because I've been gone for a month and a half, and I don't hear from anyone.
No, yeah.
I don't hear from no one. Well, that's not fair. I hear from some people.
The ones that mattered. The ones that would have been your friends without the job.
Correct.
Right.
And I don't go hang out anymore. There's not that camaraderie of 69 in cars next to each other,
right?
And doing all that stuff. We don't have that. And I couldn't imagine that after doing 25, 30 years. I don't know if I'd be able to handle that.
Yeah. We talk about it. It's like an amputation. It's like a traumatic amputation. It's not like, eventually my arm's going to fall off and I've made peace with that. No, this is, you woke up one morning and your leg's blown off. If you prepare for it, sure, then yes, you can handle it like like a pre-op thing. But if you don't prepare for it, one of the best pieces of advice, I've said it here. We had a guy at the academy who worked for LAPD, and he said, keep some friends that aren't in law enforcement and have your eyes set on something beyond your career, because he's called it the Condo and Redondo speech, because when he was on the job, he would keep his eye on the prize of retiring to Redondo Beach, California in a condominium and surfing every day. So if you don't have that condo in Redondo, whatever that is for you, you need to get it.
Yeah, and it's funny that you talk about an amputation. When I got forced out, it really felt like a divorce, because I was so personally invested in my job and my agency. I was married to that job. Right. I loved that job. It's a calling. It's not a job. It's a calling. It's a calling, and I would almost venture to say it's a cult.
Yeah,
because if they called me on a Saturday and I was at my daughter's birthday party and I had the grill going with burgers and I was flipping them and I had the moon bounce going and family over, and they called me and told me that I needed to be at work in 20 minutes, guess where I was going?
Right.
In work.
Yep.
And be tossed out like yesterday's trash. It was rough, man. Like, I would have bouts of just like, I would be in public, like out shopping with my family. The first week or two was rough. Like, I would be out and I'd have to walk out of like Target and go back to my car and just break down, because I was so hurt. I was just so hurt, because I invested personally way too much into the job. A job.
It's a one-sided relationship. And for anybody that's ever been in a relationship where you're in love madly and deeply with someone and they don't give a shit about you.
Yeah.
It's a one-sided relationship for sure.
Britney Spears and that other dude that she was married to, Kevin Featherline. That's what law enforcement is. It's Britney and Kevin Featherline.
It is one of the most dysfunctional relationships on the planet. That's for sure. Mm-hmm. And yet I miss it. Like right now, watching all this rioting and stuff. I was talking to, our listeners will know, Elliot is retired as well. And I've been texting my buddies that are still out on the front lines, saying, hey, stay safe, watch your six, keep your head down. And then I'm texting my retirement buddies going, I want to be out there so bad right now. I have to turn off the news because I get this actual angst where it just eats you up. It's insane.
My watching of live PD has increased dramatically. That's my fix. Like, that's how I get my fix. And then my kids laugh because I scream at the TV.
Yeah. My wife,
don't let them do that.
Yeah. My wife watches it, and now I don't. I have found it therapeutic to not watch it.
No, I can't. I can't. I'm like, that's a BS excuse. It's in the glove box. Go underneath the seat. It's in there.
Right.
And then they do, and my kids are like, damn, Dad.
How'd you know? Yeah, well, because, I wasn't always your dad.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I miss it, but I got to tell you, man, I honestly can say that I think that I've saved more lives doing the Roll Call Room podcast than I have in uniform. And that's not an easy statement for me to make.
Right.
But also, I look at the profession that I once loved, that I got into, and it is not the same profession.
No, it is not. It is a totally different job now.
Oh, totally. The leadership, the lack of leadership, the political influence, of law enforcement lives. You look at the riots that are going on.
Right.
Those officers are being a good portion of them. Now, I don't want to put everybody into the same thing, but a good portion of them are being handcuffed themselves with their type of response.
Mm-hmm.
And I do understand that there is a reserve response in some cases, but you look at any mission statement on any general order for every agency is to protect life and property. And you see some of the stuff that's going on, and you see officers standing down, or you see them non-existent. And I understand in some cases they're outnumbered.
Yeah, being ordered to stand down.
Ordered.
Right.
And I'm a big critic of law enforcement leadership right now, because there's a huge lack of it. There's a lot of paper leaders. There's a lot of really, really good law enforcement leaders on paper. You go in their office, they have these fantastic certificates in oak frame.
Oh, they all went to the FBI National Leadership Academy.
National Academy. Yeah, they got their gold brick.
Oh, yeah.
And let me tell you something about that. The National Law Enforcement Academy for the FBI. No dig on you guys. You can always tell the lowest performer in the FBI National Academy and the worst leader by their yellow brick. And what I mean by that is, if you go in their office and they just have the yellow brick and it's just kind of behind them, they are humble and they appreciate it going to the National Academy. The ones that buy like an oak podium stand for it.
Yeah, and a little LED spot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They have a little curtain that opens every morning when they go in there.
Yeah. And little ants like dance.
Right, exactly.
And there's an engraved plaque. You had to set out time to go on an engraving website and sit there and type out your own engravement on a gold brick.
Yeah, because they didn't do that for you.
They hand you a freaking gold brick and they say, congratulations.
Yeah.
You're the one that goes out and does all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And I would laugh, because every time I go into one of my commanders that have gone to that academy and I'd look over to their shelf of all their challenge coins and all their BS certificates, I'd see that golden brick and I'd see the ones that are on their little podium and stuff. And I would die laughing, because I would be like, if those people at the National Academy knew really what type of leader you are or lack of, they would take that brick back.
Absolutely.
So I went on a tangent about a brick, but
no, we just talked about how you can tell what kind of a cop somebody's going to be when they get off of training and the shift bid comes out. If the guys that put in for weekend graveyards versus the guys that put in for weekday day shift, Monday through Friday, you know exactly who they're going to be the rest of their career just from that first shift bid. It
doesn't matter what agency, It doesn't matter what state, it doesn't even matter what country, because I get emails from, this is so bizarre. I get emails from officers in London, England. Yes. I got one in Scotland one time. And the guy's like, because we have a term on our podcast called Steves, and Steves are the laziest of the lazy. Steves are the guys that you would turn around and be like, well, I don't want that guy coming to back me up on it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
I have people from Scotland being like, I'm not even going to try and do a Scottish accent, but they're like, I've got 4 Steves on my shift. And it's astounding, because it doesn't matter what country you're in. It's all the same thing.
Yep.
And the unfortunate part is that those are the future leaders.
Captains.
It is. Mm-hmm. It is, because they're not buying what we're selling anymore.
No, and those guys are they're instructable, orderable. They'll follow. They have their spine. See, here's the thing: they don't like having to perform spinectomies and lobotomies on people, so they would just rather promote the people that already don't have a brain or a spine.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I was a sergeant, I would always follow orders. But if I believe that your order could have either been done better, or you're going down the road of disaster, I would always say the same thing to my lieutenant and my captain. I would say, listen, I'm going to do this no matter what, because this is what you want me to do. But please consider X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Good portion of them would ignore it, but some of them would be like, all right, let's go that way. But you don't see that a lot anymore, man. You see a lot of backstabbing. Yep. You see a lot of poor decisions being made. You see a lot of vindictive behavior. Travis Yates, who's an author, he wrote a book called the courageous police leader. He speaks about that in his book, about cowardly leaders. That book changed my life.
Yeah.
Absolutely changed my life, because for 20 years in this profession, I thought it was me.
You're right.
I thought it was me.
Yeah.
And
right.
the first 5 pages of his book, I had to put the book down, and I look up at the ceiling and I go, oh my God. And my oldest daughter is like, "That is the book really good, Dad?" I go, "This is my life.
Yeah.
This has been my life for 20 years.
Right. And when somebody finally is able to put pen to paper, somebody you don't know, never met, never spoken to, they put pen to paper, and it resonates with you on such a level. It makes you feel like you're not crazy, and it makes you feel like you're not alone. And I think your podcast, as well as ours, is the audio version of that, where people are listening to it. And we get emails from wives. One of the first ones we got was a woman who had been married to a sergeant in a large agency in California. And she says, my husband won't talk about his job with me ever, won't say anything to me about it. And I've listened to you guys, and now I feel like I understand him so much better, and I'm able to relate to him differently. And it really, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Cops, despite what it seems like when they put on that uniform, are still human beings underneath. And even the cops forget that.
Yes.
Oftentimes. So
we eat our own. That's the problem.
Oh, for sure. I've been saying that for years.
We eat our own. And, when there's blood in the water.
Yeah. This profession can be very cannibalistic.
Oh my God.
If you show weakness, we will turn on you and chew you up and spit you out in a second.
I just finished writing a book, and in my book I said one of the things that chiefs should do is just make an announcement about a promotional process. Don't even plan on putting one out. Just make an announcement, and you'll be able to tell who your true leaders are, because those are the ones that are not stabbing everybody in the back.
Right.
Those are the ones that are not going to start making allegations or start bringing up a cruiser accident from 5 years ago.
Right. Those
are your true legitimate leaders.
Yeah, they don't have to succeed by making someone else a failure.
Yep. And you see that with promotional processes. How many promotional processes have you seen in your former agency and in my former agency where there have been study groups? It never freaking happens. Because it's a competitive, and this is what I was told by a candidate when I took the lieutenant's process. Why would I come to a study group? It's a competitive process. I'm trying to beat out everybody else.
Right. And when they do the tabletop exercises as part of the promotional process, you'll always see one guy who is trying to show how much he can take over the group and bend everybody to his ideas, thinking that the whole point of this exercise and the reason why it's there is to prove that he can order people around and bend them to his will. And you know what? He might be right. I don't know.
But and I will tell you, I think you can see the future of law enforcement by promotional processes for commanders.
Yep.
The lieutenant's process that I just took for my former agency was 99% geared towards administrative, and less than 1% was geared towards mental health or mentoring and actual leadership.
Yeah.
It's not something that's favorable.
Yeah, I have a degree in criminal justice. And a guy with a master's in public administration, who has way less time. Like I was already working undercover narcotics investigations when he was in, training on FTO, and yet somehow, miraculously, that master's degree in public administration made him a better police officer than somebody who'd been doing the job a lot longer.
Right. And that's the problem is that you're not seeing road dogs. You're not seeing grunts anymore holding command positions. You're seeing people that are infamous parking lot lizards, infamous, yes, men or women.
Right.
And that's a problem. And that's a major, major problem. I spoke about this particular incident with George Floyd, which is we all know in law enforcement, we all know about listening to the radio. Any good sergeant or commander or watch commander or whatever Minneapolis has there, or Minnesota,
Yeah, Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Minneapolis. Yeah. You heard things were breaking bad.
Right.
You can't tell me that you did not hear that on the radio.
No, yeah.
And yet you look
You
at every video. Where is the white shirts? Where is the brass? Where was a supervisor or a commander that could have mitigated that liability and mitigated what happened during that thing? That is a straight failure of leadership at that point.
Yeah, well, now let's get into it then. There's so many things that people are asking us on our show, and I'm sure you as well. You get in the questions. Is what do we think? Was this justified? Is this normal? Is that? Well, I can tell you just from my perspective of what I have heard from all of my cop buddies, and we have all, because if we call it the bamboo telegraph, I don't know if you guys call it that in Virginia, but when you beat the bamboo telegraph, you just, you put out these messages to all your buddies, and you all kind of figure out what each other thinks. Yeah. And I have yet to run into another cop who has at all in any way, shape, or form watched this video and said, no, it's totally fine.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you.
I have not a one. Now, here's the caveat. Let's just get this out there at the top. We were not there.
Right.
It's easy to Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
Situations are very fluid and they evolve rapidly. But we also have the ability, you and I, Nick, and if John were here, he could as well, speak to this from personal experience of having been in a situation that is
exactly like that.
Exactly like that. And the bottom line is, because you're a police officer, they give you a badge and a gun and a $40,000 automobile loaded to bear, and then set you loose in a city, oftentimes by yourself or with just your buddy. And they tell you, you have the autonomy to not only take away somebody's freedom if necessary, but their life. Right. And we trust you to do that properly. And that's a huge, huge trust. That is, you are entrusted with something that is literally life and liberty, right? And therefore, to whom much is given, much is expected, right? So when people say, I've heard cops say, well, we can't, we're held to a different standard. Well, we should be.
Yes.
We have the training, we have the experience, and we're supposed to have, this is why the process is what it is, right? Psychological screening. Yep. You're supposed to get the best and the brightest and the people. That's why veterans are a huge part of law enforcement, because they have proven that they can keep their head in stressful conditions most of the time. Now, not always, but as a general rule of thumb, if you can make it in a deployment situation, you can probably handle policing, even though fundamentally there's some differences. Nowadays, though, in this case with George Floyd, I can't see it with very, very few rare exceptions, and you'd have to what if it to death to get there. I can't see a way, and nobody I know can see a way, where once he's in cuffs, you keep your knee on the back of his neck, and most likely, from what I can tell, your other knee in the small of his back.
Yes.
For 8 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. I want to touch on one thing, and I agree with you, which is the reason why we're held to a higher standard is because the dishwasher repairman, when he screws up, doesn't create riots.
Right.
Okay.
Or kill. He kills a dishwasher at worst.
Right. So that's why we're held to we're held to a higher standard.
Right.
And the second thing is what I did when this first broke out was I reserved having any opinion on my show. I had a lot of people like you, a lot of fans reach out and say, you got to say something, blah, 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 blah. I waited until the police reports were available for me, or at least the public redacted ones were available for me to read. And the reason why I did that is I was actually astounded by what transpired before that incident.
Right.
And what nobody seems to understand, and definitely not the rioters, is that there were many factors that happened up until that point. They had him arrested. They tried to get him in a cruiser. He refused to get into a cruiser because he said he was claustrophobic. There were many, many opportunities to diffuse the situation. And that's why I speak about leadership, supervisors, and commanders, because somebody somewhere could have come up with an out of the box thinking idea to wait for the paddy wagon to come and take him. Right. And it was not in that position. And then the worst part is that you have 3 officers standing around that are cover.
Exactly.
That clearly this officer who has been arrested, he's been charged, he's awaiting trial. Obviously, he has run out of his patience to deal with this particular person. Somebody should have tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hey, bud, I got it from here, bro.
Right.
I got it from. We're gonna sit him up. We're gonna sit his back against the tire, and we're just gonna sit here and we're gonna wait for the paddy wagon. And then you start using your community policing skills. You start talking to them about football. You start talking to them about I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah. Hey, man, can you breathe now? Are you good?
Yeah. You good now, man?
Right.
I've had that before. You know how hot it is out here and everything. You need some water or something.
Right.
And we have to get into that mind frame, which is that we still are first responders. We still are responsible for the people that we arrest.
And it's not personal.
No. And it shouldn't be. And I don't know what was going through that officer's head. I really don't. But like you said, there's nobody in this profession that's going to look at you having your knee on somebody like that for 8 minutes.
Right.
8 minutes. That's insane.
So in a scenario where, and again, I'll voluntarily what if it to death. What if the cop could see his thumb was able to slip through the cuffs and was starting to slip through the cuffs? And what if he knew that George Floyd was laying on a firearm? And what if? Okay. So then why is he not saying he's on a gun? He's got a gun, right? So clearly, in the scenarios where you could justify pinning somebody to the ground for that long, other action should take place. I'll tell you why, because I did the same thing. I reserved speaking out initially because, honestly, I was in my head, I was going, there's got to be more to this story.
Yeah.
Right? And because I know it's not always like there was a video that came out after Rodney King, but years and years ago as well, where a 15-year-old boy was being arrested, and you see one of the cops that's arresting him, and the guy's in handcuffs, and he's pushed up against the trunk of a car, and some tourists are videotaping it, and one of the cops takes the kid and slams his face into the hood, the metal hood of this police car while he's handcuffed, and it looks terrible on video,
right?
Until you get the two officers' statements and alternate video where it turns out this 15-year-old kid with his hands behind his back was grabbing the officer's nutsack.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of a sudden, we didn't see that he had his nutsack in a vice grip. I could understand somebody slamming his head down to make him let go of his private parts.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this isn't that either. So I reserved. I didn't want to say anything until all these things are coming to light where 8 minutes, neck restraints. I taught them. They're wonderful. They're great. Anybody who's ever watched a UFC fight has seen neck restraints applied successfully with very little harm to the person they're being applied to. You put it on, they go night, and then once they're subdued, in a UFC fight, they pull the other fighter back and they raise his arm. And he wins, and the other guy comes to, and they make sure he's okay, and then they, shake hands and get interviewed afterwards. Happens all the time. That's a proper neck restraint. Positional asphyxia, we all know what that is. We all know. I quickly demonstrated to a family member of mine when they were asking how this all went down, and I said, okay, lay on your stomach. Then now put your hands behind your back. And they did. And then I grabbed their ankles and crossed them for them, and then I pulled their ankles up to their hands in a hog tie position, and all of a sudden all of their weight is right on their diaphragm. And I said, can you breathe? She goes, not really. You can breathe because you're talking, you can get air, right? And she goes, yeah, but not enough. I said, so you feel like you can't breathe, right? She goes, yeah, so the best thing to do is once you have them in that position is you roll them on their side.
Yes.
And get them off their abdomen. They've been teaching that for decades.
Yes. And defensive tactics are to gain compliance. And this with teaching defensive tactics, You must reevaluate your hold after a period of time. It is not a permanent hold.
No.
And what chilled me about the whole entire thing was reading the publicly released reports where they weren't worried about a weapon. They weren't holding him down because they were worried about a weapon, because they had already tried to get him into a cruiser.
Right.
They had already done you would think, a thorough search of his area, that he didn't have a gun hidden in his groin or in his belt area or whatever. But what concerns me is the second officer that's more towards his butt area turning to the officer with his knee on there and repeatedly, twice, asks him, "You think we should roll him over because he's complaining about that he can't breathe?" And this officer discounts it.
Right.
There were multiple opportunities to avoid this situation from happening. We can mark the date and the time right now. The guy, my prediction, man won. That's what I think.
Right. And I've heard people say, well, he's being charged with murder. He's a murderer. Yeah, I said, well, time out. I said, they're charging the most they think they could possibly hit him with.
So
that's why they're also charging him with manslaughter, because it is a lesser included crime in murder. So when they take it before a jury and they present their evidence, they say, we think there's a possibility that it was third degree murder. However, you can also find that if there wasn't intent to kill, there may have been a negligence and a reasonable notion that his actions, based on his training experience, were likely to cause this person's death. And I would 100% agree with that, because as I'm looking at the video, and if I was watching that on the street, or even where, I wish I had been this guy's partner standing there, I'd have walked up to him, tapped him on the shoulder, man, "You're going to kill him. Get off. I'll handle it. I got it." Because I will say it. I will make my judgment. I don't know this cop. I don't know what was going through his head, but I would be, if we were in Vegas and you were there, I would give odds that it was a combination of poor training,
contempt of cop,
and tunnel vision.
Yep. A lot of contempt of cop.
A lot of contempt of cop.
That initial reaction, the initial interaction with him when he first gets him out of the car, bad juju, man. Yeah. I watched. I was like, this guy is fired up.
And for the listeners who don't know, because we get civilian listeners a lot who don't know what contempt of cop is. It is a euphemism that is clearly nationwide, because today is my first time meeting Nick, and we both know the phrase. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's watched a court show knows what contempt of court is. You mouth off to the judge. The judge will fine you and or throw you in jail. That's their prerogative. There is a law that says they can do that. So when you piss off a cop and you get the law strongly enforced against you,
yes,
in the most vigorous way possible, and you get a rough handling that, although it might initially be justified, he doesn't have to handle you that rough. But there's part of you that probably deserves a little bit of rough treatment because of the kind of asshole you're being.
Yeah.
So that's contempt of cop, and we've all seen it. And here's the danger of contempt of cop is when it goes too far, and all of a sudden it does become personal. It becomes, how fucking dare you talk to me like that or act like that to me? And that's where your partners have to step in. I will go back to Rodney King again, because we had a recent episode for our listeners that know my dad was part of the task force that did the internal affairs investigation into the Rodney King beating. And he came and he joined us and we talked about it, and he gave us some information. And there is a portion of that video where if you watch it long enough, you will see somebody go in for another baton strike and another officer step in and grab his arm and identify that Rodney King has had enough and he's ready to be cuffed, right? And therein lies two big differences. Number one, Rodney King was not in handcuffs. Right. And number two, at some point, one of the officers said, he's good, he's had enough, we can get him into custody safely now, right? Mm-hmm. And three, some of the techniques that were available to Minneapolis, because I've read the Minneapolis policy and procedure, they have chokeholds at the deadly force level, but they have conscious neck restraints below deadly force. So there are conscious neck restraints in Minneapolis PD's approved policy of use of force. But like you said, you need to evaluate. And I was always taught when the cuffs go on, treat it like a fight. That's the bell. Ding, ding. Right? The fight is on, and then the cuffs go on, and the bell rings, and there are no more hits after the bell. Everybody who's watched boxing, watched MMA knows. When the bell rings, that's it. Anything else after the bell is dirty.
Yep.
And once those cuffs went on, the bell rang.
Yep.
And you have other options available to you. This cop, whatever his reasons were for pinning this guy to the ground for 8 minutes, it's unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. And in a sense, even worse are the guys standing around not engaged who shouldn't. They shouldn't have had tunnel vision. They should have been able to get an overall bird's eye view, and not one of them stepped in and said, like we talked about, dude, I got this. Just pull back, take a breath. We'll go get a cup of coffee afterwards. It's all good. I get it. You're heated. I got this. I'll handle it. Not one.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, I think every one of these instances, we learn something in our profession. And I think one thing that's going to need to come out of this particular incident and start being taught in police academies across the nation, because right now what we have is we have contact and cover. Am I right?
Right.
So we have contact. Then when you see that video, you see that there's an Asian officer who's the cover officer to make sure that there's no, citizens that come up and try and rip the officers off of a suspect.
Right. He's at the low ready position. He is still engaged, but he is not actively participating.
Correct. We need to start in our profession and start teaching in the academy to add a third position from now on. It is contact, cover, and scene manager. The scene manager is to determine, and it doesn't have to be a supervisor. It has to be another officer. Because if you had a scene management officer there, and it's not a self-title. Like, you don't turn around and go to a scene. You know this. You don't go to a scene and turn around and go, I'm going to be contact. You're going to be cover, all right?
Yeah.
You kind of just figure it out.
Right.
But there's got to be a scene manager that turned around and tapped this guy out and said, hey, you two at the bottom of them. First of all, I don't even know what you're doing. I mean, you can stand up now. I mean, but let's get him up.
Yeah.
Let's get him up.
Yeah. Call him the cooler. Contact, cover, and cooler.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect. And the thing is, this is something that could have been avoided. And as a profession, we need to start thinking about like what your actions, the ripple effect that it has.
Right.
Like,
he set off nationwide riots. This one guy set off nationwide riots. Hey, if ever there's a candidate for suicide watch, it's probably this dude, because once his adrenaline died down, and once the situation kind of settled in as what he allowed himself to do.
Oh, he's on it now.
Oh, that's it.
He's on it now. They just released it the other day. They were like, they put him on suicide watch because his wife also filed for divorce.
Yeah.
The next day. So
yeah, it's
a sad situation. I think as a profession, we need to grow. I think we seriously need to reevaluate our strategic responses for stuff like that, and for the way that we respond to riots as well.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another thing. And let me back up, because this is the other thing that I think I wanted to touch on with you. And John and I had talked about how we wanted to address it. Is I have been hit up on social media. I was in a discussion with somebody just this morning about the law enforcement response, and there's a viral video going around of parents decontaminating a child who was pepper sprayed.
I saw that. Yeah.
So we can talk about that in a second. But one of the things that has come out of this from some of my more liberal friends, and God bless you, the world needs bleeding hearts, and I love that you have those. But the world also needs hard hearts who are willing to make tough decisions. Not everybody can hold the dog's hand while it's suffering. Somebody has to be the one to put it down, right?
Yeah.
So there's enough room in this world that we need that balance. Here's what I'm going to say to those friends that are immediately saying this is systemic racism. If you think for 1 second that you don't know who this cop is, and yet you can still say that he did what he did to George Floyd because he had vitriolic, malicious racism in his heart against a black man, then you better go get a job working for the Psychic Friends Network, because I don't know how the hell you know what is in somebody. Or what are you, the shadow? You can mind read. You don't know what's in this guy's heart. This guy may have donated, 10% of his income every year to the NAACP. I don't know. I don't know him. I don't know. Has he freaking, I have a buddy of mine who was on my old department that adopted a child from China, because he didn't want this baby growing up in the awful conditions of communist China, because she was a girl, and he knew what that was going to mean for her life. And so God forbid he ever gets involved in an altercation where he shoots an Asian person and somebody accuses him of being racist against Asians, and he's got an Asian adopted child. I'm not saying this dude does have that or doesn't. I'm saying I don't know, and neither do you. That's the first thing. So let's get the racism. What I saw on the video was a cop that was using force that ended up killing a man who didn't deserve to die. That's what I saw. I saw nothing that had to do with race.
Yep. Bottom line.
Right. It was coincidentally a black dude and a white dude. Now, if it comes out that this dude really is a racist secret member of the Klan who's posted terrible things about the next black dude I arrest, I'm going to suffocate him on purpose, then guess what? Give him the chair.
Yeah, I'm all in.
Hang him in the court. Hang him in public square. I'm all for it, because guess what? Number one, he doesn't deserve to be a human being, let alone a police officer. And number two, you set an example for the rest of the world saying you can't do that. And if you do, you don't get to be a part of this civilization anymore. We're not going to lock you up. We're just going to kill you because you shoot horses, right?
Yeah.
So let's get the racism part out of the way. But let's talk about the riot for a second.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that little kid. How dumb do you have to fucking be as a parent to take a child to a goddamn quote unquote, because I've seen people, well, they were taking him to a protest, not to a riot. What the?
Bullshit.
Are you watching the news? There is a better than 90% chance that your protest could turn into an effing riot, and you're taking a child there. You're dumb. You're a bad parent. I will just tell you that right now.
And I'll add to that. They're full of shit, because the parent that's standing next to them is one wearing a face mask, hoodie, shield. They knew that there was a potential for OC spray. They knew that. So don't do that. Yeah. Don't do that. No. That's bullshit. And then the other thing is that there's somebody that's pouring milk on top of her to lessen
neutralize. Yeah.
Okay. I don't fucking walk around with a half a gallon of milk on me.
Right.
I only bring it when I know that I'm about to make a milkshake.
Yeah. You know who carries milk around to protests? People that know that milk neutralizes pepper spray and expect to be fucking pepper sprayed.
Exactly. That child did not belong there. That's not the environment to belong. Unless you were walking from the Cheesecake Factory, and you were on your way to your house, or you're on your way to your car, and you were caught in the crosshairs of a riot, I'm all for it.
Right.
But I saw that this morning, and I was like, I feel for the child, because OC sucks ass. It sucks ass.
Right.
But you know what? That was avoidable, just like the death of George Floyd.
Yeah. Call CPS on the parents is what you do. And here I'll go you one better. If they bring the child to a riot or to a potential riot, then they're at best felony stupid, and at worst malicious parents that are hoping to get their child pepper sprayed to gain sympathy for their movement by having it caught on video. And I don't know which it was, but in your scenario, let's say they are just out for a walk to the Cheesecake Factory through a fucking protest. How felony stupid are you?
Yep.
That you're going to walk with your kid through an area where they might get caught up in a protest. I got an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. And yesterday, when there was a Black Lives Matter rally at the park 2 blocks from my house, and they said, we want to go to Starbucks, I said, no.
Yeah.
And what do you mean? I said, there's no reason to go out in the middle of that and potentially have your car swarmed and get yanked out by the short and curlies and have your ass beat and become a statistic. Starbucks ain't that important right now.
No.
And so if these parents are just walking by to the Cheesecake Factory to get a piece of cheesecake and their kid gets pepper sprayed, well, again, your fault for being that fucking stupid.
I'll tell you this right now. You and I better get a free piece of cheesecake out of the Cheesecake Factory because
right?
we dropped the game like 16 times.
It is pretty good.
It's damn good, and they should be sponsoring your show because you gave them such free plugs. We could have picked any restaurant.
Right, exactly. You just happened to mention them.
That's the first one I thought of because I want cheesecake so bad.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. But I agree with you, man. I think, going back to the race thing, I think our profession, I think we need to match the demographics that we serve the communities. And the problem is that we don't have a good portion of the demographic that we don't represent applying for the job, nor do they qualify for the job because of past criminal behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to one race. Let's put that there right there.
Right.
Okay. You need to be held to a higher standard, which means that you can't have any felony arrest. You can't drive your car like an idiot. But the thing is that we do need to represent the communities that we serve. It's never going to be 50-50 or whatever, 75-25, whatever it is. It's never going to be equal in the sense that you're going to have the same amount of black officers that you are going to have white officers. But the thing is that agencies need to go out there and seek the demographic that they're missing. And if they can't get it from their own community, they need to travel out of the state and start direct recruiting. And that's the only way that we're going to break down that racism kind of, all cops are racist kind of thing, is because every time they turn around, they look around. We'll take Ferguson, for example. The department was 98% Caucasian. Their community is mostly African American. They didn't do a really good job recruiting for African Americans. So
I'll give the caveat because we say this all the time. You got to without lowering your standards.
1,000%. I agree with you 1,000%, which is that if you have a problem with the police and you don't think that we're doing it the right way, then apply.
Right.
And if you meet the standards, then you should be afforded the opportunity. And I guarantee you 3 weeks into the academy, you are going to change your tune as to why we have the tactics that we have.
Yep.
Or I encourage you to go to one law enforcement involved line of duty death funeral, and it'll change your fucking life. It'll change your life.
Just go on a ride along.
Oh yeah.
Go on a ride along.
Just do that. I used to love community activists that used to go and use the Milo machine, the active shooter.
Yeah, the FATS trainers.
Yeah, the FATS trainers. And they're so quick to fucking shoot people.
Yep.
And you're like, what this person just screamed at you.
Yep.
I was scared.
Yeah.
Well, what the fuck do you think we do?
Yeah.
Like you gotta wait for that to play out. And now, because the way that society is with law enforcement and how we crucify law enforcement officers that make lethal force decisions, you basically not only need to see a gun, you need to wait for the gun to be raised and almost at the point where it's being shot at you before you can shoot back.
Right. Well, at least that's the way we're treating it.
It's
insane.
And we thought body cams would fix everything.
Well, and what's amazing is body cams are showing that most of the time they're doing it right.
Yes, 1,000%.
And that's why now body cams are racist. First, every cop needs to wear a body cam. Now body cams are racist. Why are they racist? Oh, because they're showing people doing bad stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, asshole. Pull the other one.
It'll be really, really interesting how this case plays out. I made my prediction that, like you said, Vegas odds. Yeah. I don't see this going to trial.
No, I don't either.
I don't see it in a trial. I say man 1 5 to 10.
I don't know. I would be willing to go 10 to 20 if he gets man 1. He'll plead to the 10 to 20 because they want the number.
Yeah, they want the number.
They want that high number, and then he'll do 8 to 10.
I'll amend my prediction then. Definitely man 1, 10 to 20 plea bargain, hands down.
For sure.
And
nobody wants to see this go to court, especially the officer.
No.
Unless, and again, the asterisk is there is some magic piece of information that we don't have.
Well, I was waiting for the preliminary autopsy results. I know they're waiting for toxicology, but I really don't care. I don't care at this point about toxicology, because I really don't care whether or not he had PCP or whatever in his system at this point. Just the caveat of his underlying medical conditions where his death was exacerbated by the control hole, whatever the verbiage was.
Yeah.
He's fucking done.
Well,
he's done.
And here's the deal. I don't care what he had on board. There's no reason to pin his neck or his abdomen to the ground for 8 minutes. There isn't. There just isn't. I can't. And again, I'm open to somebody changing my mind. But at this point, call me Steven Crowder and put a sign in front of me on a college campus, and I'll put, he didn't need to put his knee on his neck for 8 minutes. Change my mind right there. And I will do it. I'll do it in uniform with pictures of me as a cop and dare other cops to come up and justify it to me. Fine.
I haven't met one, like you said, I have not met one cop, or I've not seen in any cop platforms on Facebook anybody defending this particular thing. Where cops are getting heated about is the riots versus protests,
right?
And defacing of monuments and public property that these dingbats don't even realize that taxpayers are now going to have to pay to repair. We're not talking about Target. We're not talking about Starbucks. We're talking about, like I saw this morning, a picture of the law enforcement memorial spray painted, the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial. That's right in my backyard. I'm 10 minutes away from all of those monuments. Who the fuck do you think is going to pay to fix all that shit?
You know what? That should be one of the requirements for anybody that's arrested for rioting and looting is their community service is to go clean up these monuments and these public buildings and have to clean it up and rebuild it. That should be part of their sentence.
Aside from them being assigned to a police precinct and their community services to clean the police precinct.
You gotta wash the blood, piss, and shit out of the back of police cars for a week.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm going to add one more thing to the riot thing, because another question I got was people. There was a woman who posted a picture of. She took a rubber bullet to the face and it broke skin, and she gave her a black eye, and she's, I was just standing there, And okay, here it is. Ready? This might be breaking news to people, and maybe they don't know this, but contrary to what seems to be the pervasive thought process in these young kids who are out there with their cell phones and TikTok and Twitter and YouTube, riots aren't a fucking spectator sport. Okay? If you're standing there and a riot is happening, you are on one side or the fucking other.
Yeah.
So if you are wearing a badge telling people to go home, then wear the badge and tell people to go home. If you're on the other side and you're being told by somebody with a badge to go the fuck home, go the fuck home. Because anything else that happens to you when you don't go the fuck home is on you. You asked for that shit.
I just wish there was video of the actual impact.
Oh, God, yeah.
Of the rubber bullet, because I have watched the video. I don't know if you've seen it.
It better have sound, too. Thwack.
Yeah. Yeah. There's video of this facility closing the gates quickly to try and shut protesters out.
Are you talking about the trash can one?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me tell you something. Whoever posted that on YouTube, 247 of those views I'm responsible for, because I have watched it over and over and over because I cannot get over the protester getting run over by the dumpster from other protesters.
The greatest comment I have seen about that video was that it was soy on soy crime.
I think, I was talking to somebody this morning from the profession, and I said, the rioters have had a couple of days now. Now it's our turn. Now we need, and when I say we, I mean, again, the commanders, chiefs of police need to turn around and go, okay, you've had your fucking fun. We get it. You're upset.
Knock it off and let's talk.
Knock it off. Enough is enough. enough property has been damaged. Municipalities, cities, counties, states are already in the fucking red from COVID, businesses being closed down. They can't afford to stay open. And now you're destroying small businesses. Enough is enough.
Yep.
I think as a profession, I think enough is enough. Curfews need to be placed.
Yep.
And I think, you know what? You're out past 9 o'clock. Curfew's 9 o'clock. You're going to get a rubber bullet in the face.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's not even from these riots, but I love, and I will watch on repeat, on a loop, the guy who takes the tear gas can to the nuts. He picks up a tear gas can and throws it back at the cops. So they send one downrange, and it just, coincidentally happens to hit him right in the mommy daddy button.
The crotchal region.
Yeah, exactly. Or if you go to our Instagram or you go to our Facebook feed, there's a video somebody sent us of a guy trying to throw a Molotov cocktail and it bouncing back and setting him on fire.
Oh my God. I got to find that because that might be the dumpster one it was still hilarious this morning as much as it was 2 days ago. But I need something new because I'm not in the profession anymore. And I miss my daily stupid.
Oh God. Yeah.
I totally miss going to stupid scenes and then getting in my cruiser and weeping for society.
Yeah, I do miss some of the stories where the story either ends or begins with the phrase, "You can't make this shit up."
Yeah. When you meet up with your buddies later on, you're like, you're never fucking going to believe this.
Yeah, and they always do, but at the same time, they don't.
No.
Well, how can people find you? How can people find your podcast?
So on all platforms, iTunes, Spotify, our platform is Anchor. We're on YouTube at Roll Call Room Podcast. We're on Facebook at Roll Call Room Podcast. We're on Instagram at Roll Call Room Podcast. We have our website, which is rollcallroom.com. I think that's everywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. If you, it sounds like if you type in Roll Call Room Podcast on any social media platform, they'll find you.
Yeah,
kind of same thing with us.
Yeah. And my book will be coming out sometime, I hope, fingers crossed, in August, and it's called Police Mental Barricade. So look out for that. And that's everything.
Well, the floor is yours to give any final thoughts. One of our things is we usually like to dedicate an episode. Well, dedicate every episode to a member of the veteran law enforcement or first responder community who lost their life in the line of duty, and we always give our guest the opportunity to pick a person if they have somebody that comes to mind, and if not, we have somebody that we want to dedicate it to. So it's up to you if you'd like to.
The only one that I would say is just the I don't know if you would classify it as line of duty, but I'll turn it back to you if it's not. Is that NYPD officer that took their own life yesterday? I think
I would classify that as line of duty. I think police suicides should be considered line of duty deaths because they're a death that is directly resulted from emotional wounds that are sustained in the line of duty.
Right. I don't have his information. They didn't release his name. Obviously, that attaches to the stigma. But all I know is that he was a 34-year-old male from the NYPD, and he leaves behind a family. So my thoughts and prayers are with them. So,
well, I'd like to dedicate this episode then to David Patrick Underwood. He was a federal law enforcement, federal protective services officer in Oakland who was killed as a result of all the George Floyd riots. And I can tell you, if George Floyd were alive, which unfortunately he isn't, but I guarantee you he'd be very upset that a black police officer was killed ostensibly in George Floyd's name due to these riots and protests. So, the rioting, protest is fine. People have been talking about the Colin Kaepernick thing and say, well, these cops are taking a knee. You were against taking a knee when Kaepernick did it, but now you're saying that cops taking a knee in support of, the protesters is good. When Kaepernick took a knee, it was bad. I said, yeah, because Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem and he's an athlete and there's nothing going on other than him being a disrespectful piece of shit.
Yeah.
These cops are taking a knee to show their support for a community that is incensed and outraged at the needless death of George Floyd by an idiot.
And if anybody knows any history about war, taking a knee also is a form to your counterpart.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, your that you're taking a knee. You're gonna sit this one out. Yeah. And it's just a form. I wouldn't say a form of respect, but it's definitely it's used.
Yeah.
So to compare the two, that guy's just a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other episode. Well, Nick, we appreciate it. And what I'd like to do, we had talked about this for our listeners. We're going to make this episode available, the audio available to Nick, so he can post it on his Roll Call Room podcast feed. And then in a couple of weeks, when John's available and some of this madness has died down, we're going to return the favor, and we're going to be guests on the Roll Call Room podcast, which should be really cool. It should be. I'm super psyched. And I'm really glad we found each other, because it sounds like you're doing the Lord's work over there, and it dovetails right into what we're trying to do over here. So we got both coasts covered.
Yeah.
So we're going to make our audio available to Nick's listeners on his feed, and then hopefully when we flip this around in a month, Nick will make his feed available to our listeners as kind of a little bonus episode. So Nick, stay in touch, man. I appreciate you coming on the show. Anytime you want to come back, we're happy to have you, and it was a great conversation. So until our next episode, for our listeners, as always, come home with your shield or on it.